Welcome to Eyes and Teeth, Edition 2, Season 4. This is my tribute to the water rats. Just in the last few days, we received the news of the passing of Johnny Clark, a new water rat, but a very professional comedian, a great down-to-earth guy, a golfer. The golfing society will miss him. The water rats will miss him. I was just getting to know Johnny in Lodge. We sat next to each other and he started to talk to me without moving his lips. We were laughing. He wanted to know more about the world of ventriloquism, and I was happy to talk to him about that. As you know, I like to talk about that. It's an awful time for everybody, and I dedicate this episode to Johnny Clark. Great comic. Johnny Clark, thank you for the laughs. God bless you, brother. Eyes and Teeth. From one great comic to another, and from one of the most original fast-paced comedians and a comedian's comedian, Adrian Walsh is respected in the business. Not just show business, you watch him in action and you instantly get caught up in his quick-firing masterpieces. On the corporate world, show business, charity world, golfing world, all the worlds. Mainly the world of cruising as well, probably in the last 20, maybe 30 years. Talk about the QE2, the Des O'Connor show, the Des and Mel show. Adrian's been there. The summertime specials. Adrian Walsh, warm-up TV man. TV warm-up man. Warming up the TV. He warms up all TVs. He's there for us, and he's got such a brilliant wit. I love the man that is Adrian Walsh. He's been through a very hard time. Adrian's not just one of us that is fighting to get back on the stage through these COVID times, but even more recently he's been fighting his own battle after having a stroke. The stroke knocked him for 6. It knocked the business. We couldn't believe what happened to Adrian, but he's fought back. He's gone back to stage. Listen to the times when he got himself through these moments. We want to laugh again. We want to be back on stage. We want to feel those warm spotlights on our faces. We want to hear the crowds cheering and laughing. We want to hear the sound of the curtains opening, the sound of the engines of the cruise ship starting up as we start our act in show 1. We just want it all to come back again. So let's talk about those days, reminisce about those good days, and let's look forward to the new ones. This is the wonderful Adrian Walsh.
Hey, listen, I'm regarding this as a gig, you know. I've got it in, I've even put it in the diary in black ink.
Yeah, I guess we're just sitting here waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the next cancellation.
Yeah.
You developed the 3L formula, living life with laughter.
Yes, I hope so.
That's a nice way, isn't it, to see things?
I think it's the only way. When you look at
Yes, it's what we need, isn't it?
more than ever.
See, my good friend, comedian and vocalist Neil Warner used to watch you when he was a blue coat, and he said he used to sit there in awe just watching your act every week that you were at the site. I'm not sure, maybe a Pontins or something. So you used to do the Pontins.
Yeah, it probably was. I did quite a few seasons for Pontins. Then I did the theatre tour for Butlins for 5 years as well, which was about 2,000 miles a week and about 23 shows a week for 7 months.
Blimey, they were long seasons back then, weren't they? Whether they were theatre summer seasons or holiday centres, Butlins, Warners, and
oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean that faded 20 years ago, I think, Adrian. It's
Oh yeah, very much.
I started in the business, I guess, when I was 22, about 25 years ago. Yeah, it was already fading then.
Yeah, but when I first went into business when I was 16, the 2 old pro comics I worked with, they said exactly the same thing.
Oh, really? So
yeah, they had come through vaudeville 5 shows a day.
I see. So the theatres. Yeah.
Yes, so it's constantly changing and evolving, Steve.
It is, I guess. It is about evolving, isn't it? And sort of moving on the next generation. And then, I mean, it used to be the theatres and the summer seasons, television even. But then it was the cruise ships. And now it looks like we're moving again away from cruise ships because of what's going on. So, God knows what's next. Because the comedy clubs are suffering as well now for the last 10 years or so.
I've seen that lovely comedy club. I've never worked it, but the one up in Glasgow is a Strand, I think.
Oh, yes.
They call it. They said there was quite a few things on about that, and being in danger of closing, and quite a few. And it just worries me for the young comedians coming along next, where they're going to be working. It'll probably be, you'll be sending in a three-dimensional hologram.
Oh, confusion.
Adrian Walsh, you are known to have an encyclopedic knowledge of comedy. Has this always been with you?
It's just something, I was very lucky, Steve, when I was about 8 years old. My father took me to the Empire Theatre in Belfast. We were standing outside, and in those days, it's going back many years.
Right.
When you were queuing up to go into the theatre, you had buskers outside, you had jugglers, you had
mime artists. Yeah.
Everything.
Wow.
And I thought that was a show, and then we went inside, and the lights come down, and we were setting up in the gods, and all of a sudden there was this massive noise, with a safety curtain came up, the steel safety curtain, and then the venue went into darkness, and the music, the overture started, and I was in heaven. I thought, and then I think the comedian, looking back, it was a wonderful English comedian called Freddie Sales.
Okay.
Who eventually ended up working in Las Vegas, and he did about 8 minutes, and I probably didn't know much of what he was talking about, but the ambience in the theatre, with everybody laughing, it totally enthralled me.
You remembered that?
Oh, and I remember, and I thought 8 minutes, I thought, that's a pretty good job. I'll go for that one.
If only they asked you to do 8 minutes on a cruise ship, eh? Two 8-minute spots instead of 3 45s.
Yeah, but you know, in those days of vaudeville, the comedians at the top of the bill would have done the most, 15 to 18 minutes at the top of the bill.
Wow. So I mean, they had so many acts on, didn't they? But they were all doing about 5 or 6 shows a night, going from theatre to theatre, weren't they? So
that's the other thing. The pace of the shows. There was about 9 acts on that night, if I remember.
Wow.
And whenever my dad had a few shillings, he would take me up to the theatre. I just loved it. When I'm working on the cruise ship, I still love sitting in the theatre and watching a show. I never missed a show. I went and seen every act, and sometimes went and seen the act twice. I just love the feel of the theatre.
I always went to see the comic twice. I love to see a comic on a cruise ship, and a lot of us know each other as well, you know, so we sit there and...
Of course.
And we sit there really sometimes to help them, to say, oh, I liked it when you done that, but you've done it different in the second show, you know. It's every show is different, even though it's the same act, but an hour later you've got a different audience, and the show can be a completely different experience.
Totally. I always say to young comedians who are new to the cruise industry, I always say, but the one thing you must remember, you will never come off at the end of the night and say, those 2 shows were exactly the same.
Not at all.
Even if there were 2 great shows, there will always be a difference. And you may, I've worked on ships where I've had a stormer for first show, without second show, and nothing, not even a loud smile, and vice versa.
Really?
And then I've had two great shows, I've had 2 bad shows, I've had one good one bad one. There's no set formula to it whatsoever.
No, not at all. You've got a loving relationship with cruise ships over the years. What was your favourite ship, Adrian, and what do you love about working them?
My favourite ship, just looking back, I don't like to pick one out, but I always loved the old QE2.
Do you know what? That's my favourite. Yeah.
Yeah, those.
I loved it.
I don't think I ever worked a ship I didn't like, because as a performer, what we do is a variable, and if you can cut out all the variables, if you've got good sound, good setting, good lights, you're in with a chance.
Yes.
Whereas when you're doing corporate functions or any other sort of function, you don't know what you're going to be up against. Whereas there, you know, if you've got the material and you're ready to go, they give you the best tools to do the job. And for any young performer who wants to learn stagecraft, it's a wonderful place to do it.
It's wonderful to watch as well, wasn't it? Yeah, to watch the other acts. It really is nice to see how every actor's built their lighting into their show, or how they build a song or link a gag. You know, it's brilliant.
Young comics can go and watch the comedian, and they'll see some of the ad libs are not really ad libs.
Yes.
You can also see the way he constructs the act. When I first come to England, I started in clubs when I was 16, and when I was 22, the day we got married, my wife and I came away to live in Blackpool, and we lived in Blackpool for 10 years. But those were the days where you could do 7 nights a week around Manchester and do three shows a night. And even if you had a bad show, you had to get over it within half an hour, 40 minutes, because you had another one to do. And that's a great thing. I know young comedians go along to the Comedy Store, and if it doesn't go well for them,
Interesting,
5-6 weeks before they have another go.
Yeah, it can put you off.
Yeah, it's detrimental to their confidence. And the other thing in those days, you were always watching other performers. I can honestly say, Steve, all the senior comedians I worked with when I was a young comic, not one of them ever turned me down for advice or help. But I constantly asked, and I was always around, and I would stay behind and watch, the comedians of the names of that day. And it was like, it was my university.
Yeah.
To watch the other performers.
It sounds like you were so passionate about being around the business and comedy and comedians that there's no way that you would not have ended up being a comedian, even from that young age. That's so nice that you had that passion.
Well, it really happened because when I was a kid at school, I was dyslexic. But in those days, it wasn't called dyslexia.
No.
And when I stood up to read, I was always nervous, and I would come to a word if it didn't. And what I actually found out, if I came to a word I didn't know, I would substitute it for something else. And for some reason, I was always able to find a funny word to put in there.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
Yes. So the kids would always laugh, and the kids would, let Walsh read it. But the teacher didn't want me to.
No, but at the end of the day, you were learning and trying to get through this.
Oh, very, very, very much so.
I mean, when you're on stage, Adrian, the audience don't get time to breathe between your jokes. You literally go out there and kill them, nearly. What is your writing process?
Well, I've always liked to do, when I do something on stage, like even one line, and I notice somebody in the audience nudging their husband or nudging their wife and going, I built up a routine about barbecuing just from one line one night where I seen a woman in the audience nudge her husband and nod to him. I thought, there's a train of thought to go on that one. So I would write the one gag and then try and add to it.
Okay, that's nice.
And build up. And obviously there's a probably 80% failure of what you write, and there's about 20% gets through. Because you can never tell. Writing jokes for other comedians, I always remember, I was being commissioned many times to write for TV and for radio.
Okay.
There were 140 jokes. And sometimes you get to 35 and you were struggling.
Really?
You were struggling.
Right.
And then you would write in 5 that you didn't, that would fill the page up. That's the best I can do. And they would be the 5 that they would choose. And the ones that you worked hard over, they didn't want to. But it's as personal. It really is as personal as the taste of chocolate for people.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes an ad-lib can get a huge response, and something you wrote 10 years ago that you thought was fantastic doesn't get anything. You think, hang on, I've just said something on stage that got a huge laugh, and something that I've honed over 10 years has not got the laugh. So it's just, I guess it's because every audience is different, isn't it?
Yeah, but the other thing is, if it went well every night, there'd be no point doing it, Steve.
That's true. We'll never learn.
And if you went out on stage and everybody loved you, you're not being a comedian, you're holding a lolly.
What would be your laugh allowance, which means that the time between jokes, or laughs per minute, is that a rule for you? You got laughs per minute, or do you just do what you do?
I never really thought about that. I know Bob Hope used to get, I think it was 4 laughs a minute.
Oh, really? Was that his plan?
And when you used to watch the magnificent Bob Monkhouse in Cabaret, I'm sure his laugh ratio was even more. Sometimes, I remember hearing a story once of, there's a wonderful comedian from New York called Freddie Roman.
All right.
And he was sitting in an audience, I think it was Billy Crystal, and they were watching a young comedian. When he finished, Billy Crystal said to Freddie Roman, what did you think of the comic? He said he paralysed him. He said, but I don't know who he is. He didn't leave a tip.
No?
Sometimes you've got to sacrifice a laugh for an emotion.
Yes.
And let them know who you are.
Wow.
To me, there's no rules. There's a wonderful comic called Stephen Wright.
I love Stephen, yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, but he does everything wrong.
Really?
He doesn't look at the audience.
No, he looks down at the floor, doesn't he?
Yeah, he talks in a monotone voice.
Yeah.
No joke is connected to the next one. And he's fabulous.
Yeah, do you think that's why it works? Because it's completely different to how others do it, or?
Listen, you've got to be yourself.
Yeah.
Really. I watched Netflix the the other night, Michael McIntyre.
Oh yes.
You stand up, and it was wonderful.
He connects with the audience. I am going to watch that. I know that's just been released, The Showman, but he connects with his audience, Michael, doesn't he? He's a lovable personality, and that's what people warm to with Michael. But you know he's got some good material coming up.
Yeah, but the thing about him, what I think is wonderful, he's visually funny and verbally funny, which is
yes.
You don't always get that mix.
No, I know what you mean. And you've got that warm charm about you when you're performing. It's so comfortable to watch. And your audience know that when your joke finishes, you've got another cracker coming along soon after. So is it a conscious decision to start with some mild jokes at the beginning and then ease them in? Or do you just go out and go bang, bang, bang? Because I watched something that you've done. There's something on YouTube the other day. It's a wonderful 25-minute spot in a club. That was filmed, but you literally, the audience are crying for 25 minutes with laughter, of course. But
is that long ago? I forget now, Steve.
it's just a brilliant spot, Adrian. I think it's about 20 years ago. But I mean, I think it's your charm that people warm to. I mean, if you grab them in the first, you have to get an audience in the first minute, don't you? And then, have you got a certain gag that does that?
No, not really. I always like topical gags to start with what was in the headlines and what's going on. A really good topical. But you can't be too topical because sometimes nothing hurt to use that day or that night because people have been working, people are busy.
And they haven't seen it, yeah.
Yeah, a wonderful Dublin comic called Tony Cawley.
Okay.
I first befriended Tony when I lived in Black. Funny, you would have loved the show because Arthur Worsley was on the show.
Yeah, I love Arthur. Brilliant.
But even watching him, he's probably one of the few ventriloquists that never spoke.
It's weird, isn't it?
he never actually spoke, but it worked. It worked beautifully.
It did work. And it's like Stephen Wright looking down at the floor. Arthur Worsley never spoke, but it worked because no one else done that. It was completely different to what others do. So it stood out, I guess.
There's Gary Delaney, I think, is a wonderful, wonderful joke writer.
Brilliant, yeah.
Brilliant joke writer. And Rita Rudner, the American comedian.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought she had great material. And look, I think most people start off, a combination of who your heroes are.
Yes.
And then you develop.
And you have to find your way, don't you? It takes years to find your own style, really, and in the early years.
I think my generation, it took longer. I think young comedians nowadays, the breeding ground, when you go into a comedy store, you go into people who want to hear comedy and to see comedy.
Yes. So
you're getting up, but in my day, you had to get up in a working men's club, really, and you were an interruption to the bingo. Yes. Some wonderful audiences, some great experiences, some terrible experiences, but it was a different thing. They weren't actually there to see you.
Yeah.
I think young comedians nowadays find themselves. I've seen young comics in their 20s, and they're sensational. Where in my day, it probably took me into my late 30s before I found really what I was about.
Was it Opportunity Knocks that gave you your break, Adrian, or was it before that?
I did Odd Knocks first, then I did Rising Stars, and then I started to do my first ever television was for Frank Carson, a thing called Be My Guest.
Okay.
Granada TV.
Right.
I got 2 minutes. I think I got about 2 minutes on it.
Right. That's a lot these days.
The Bachelor's, 3 Degrees.
Wow. This is a variety show.
Yeah, Paul Daniels. It was presented by Paul Daniels, and he was lovely. It was my first ever TV, and he came down to the dressing room and he said, "How are you feeling, Adrian?" I said, "Oh, Paul, I'm really nervous." He said, "Adrian, let me tell you something. Whether you do well or you don't do well, the Prime Minister will still be the Prime Minister. The clock will still be ticking on." He said, "It won't change anything."
That's a really nice way of helping, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, when I was 16 years old, I did a summer season in Bangor, County Down, and I called it Little Theatre. And the two comedians were George Daniels and Jimmy Fletcher, and they were both in their 70s.
Wow.
And I sat between them every night for about 6 weeks. And if they had been solicitors, to the knowledge they gave me, I would have been bankrupt with what I had to pay them. I remember coming off stage one night, and I hadn't done very well, and I was shaking my head coming off stage, and he went through me. Don't ever let the audience know you've had a hard night. Go back and take an encore. After the show, the two of them sat with me, and George Daniels said to me, "Listen, Adrian, if you want to be a comedian and spend your life doing this, you're going to have hard nights. You're going to have terrible nights. But you'll have great nights, because failure is not the opposite of success. It's a part of success."
That's
and the
nice.
other thing he said to me was, he said, no matter how bad a night you're going to have on stage, he said, let me tell you this, anybody, and I mean anybody in a graveyard would swap with you.
That's true, isn't it? If it was possible, yeah, but wow.
And Jimmy Fletcher said to me, he said, always enjoy the applause, Adrian. He said, but whatever you do not believe it.
Yeah.
Like, don't ever let it go to your head. That's just for the moment. You've done a good show. The audience are grateful and they're thankful and that are good. I think one of the best things I ever heard about comedy was Jerry Seinfeld said, being a comedian is like changing the baby's nappy. It makes everything comfortable for about 40 minutes, and that's it. It doesn't change the world.
No, that's nice. There's some nice phrases, aren't they, to sort of sum everything up in the world of comedy, and it's very true to listen to all that. I've got a couple of lines here that I just heard that I really laughed out loud, like mackerel's good for the brain, but you never see him on Mastermind. Or all brand keeps you regular. Why don't they give them to bus drivers? Your way of writing and delivering a gag is just.
No, that's some old stuff. That is. I might put it back in the act again.
Yeah, well, it works. It's still it's it's material that doesn't get old. It's just funny. They still sell mackerel and they're still bus drivers. So funny is funny, and it's just wonderful to see. Now I remember seeing you just sitting on the couch on the Des O'Connor show when he used to do the Wednesday night show.
I did 2 of those, and then I did 9 Des and Mel.
Des and Mel, yeah, I remember seeing you on there. And Des really knows his comedians, doesn't he?
Well, he said a very interesting thing to me, because I hadn't done Des for about 10 years, and when I went to do Des and Mel, when I finished one of the spots, he said to me afterwards, he said, Adrian, you've grown into your material. And I had to agree with him.
Yeah.
Because even when I started off as a 16-year-old, I was doing material that was far too old for me.
Or like wife jokes or grandchildren jokes.
I can't even remember now. I've got a tape recording of me when I was 17 at a golf club in Belfast. And Steve, I've been totally honest with you, I can't understand a word of it.
Really?
Honestly. I think I started off and I didn't take a breath for 20 minutes.
Oh, was it? So you were even faster back then, sort of bang, bang, bang with the jokes. You're just talking quite fast, or?
Oh, yeah. But the funny thing is, I always enjoyed live TV more. I found live TV less stressful.
Do you?
Because sometimes when you did a recorded one, you never knew what they were going to leave in or what they were going to take out.
All in the edit.
I remember doing a summertime special in Eastbourne. And when they come out, they chopped the middle of a joke out, and they just needed the time for a routine, a dance routine or something. I'm fine with that. But people phone me up the next day, what was that joke?
Well, that's out of your control, isn't it? It's out of your hands once you've recorded it. And if somebody editing out the jokes, I mean, that was the danger of when the comedians were on, in the 70s. But I think they got it right. They never stopped halfway through a joke.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, I did about 6 or 7 of those comedians, but it was never used because Johnny Hunt said I couldn't edit you, Adrian.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so well, that's what he told me. Maybe he just thought it was rubbish.
Well, no, maybe he thought you were too good or something. That's incredible that I can't edit you. That's mad. I mean, you've done so many TV and radio shows, over 300 appearances. Is there any TV that stands out for you that you really love to look back on?
Well, there's one that really stands out, not for the right reasons. I was on the night Tommy Cooper died.
Oh, Her Majesty's.
Yeah, because it was Starbuck dancers, me, the Flying Pickets, and Tommy Cooper. I honestly believe he looked at my act and thought this is the end of show business.
Wow, I mean, what a night to go on. And were you on before Tommy or after Tommy?
Yeah, no, but before him, because after him was Les Dennis and Dustin G.
Yes, wow.
And then it was Hard Keel. The top of the bill was Donny Osmond. And the strange thing about that, whenever I see Les, because Alan Ainsworth, the conductor, has passed away, David Bell, the wonderful
Yeah,
One of the
producer.
best
Yeah.
variety show producers the world is, only in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
He was able to capture energy, David Bell.
Was he? He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he just, and he's passed away, Tommy Cooper's passed away, Hart Keys passed away, and Tommy Cooper's son, who was standing on the side of the stage, has passed away. So every time I meet Les Dennis, I go, how you keep it, Les?
It's worrying, isn't it? It's very sad that I mean, that whole moment back then. But I mean, just even Dustin G, yeah, it's very sad that we've lost these
He was a
greats.
wonderful performer, Dustin, wonderful.
Yeah, I never got to see Dustin G. My mum and dad remind me that they saw him at Lakeside Country Club with Les Dennis. So in the 80s, I think that was. So I never got to see Dustin.
I remember in the 70s he came to the Norbreck Castle in Blackpool, which was in, would you hear this? It was an L-shaped room, and I always thought it was a very hard room to work.
Yeah.
I think he did about an hour and a half, and they wouldn't let him off the stage. But they were great action clubland in those days. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Ronnie Jukes and Ricky Lee.
I've heard of those guys.
He was tap dancer, did impressions, did gags.
Okay.
His wife was a soprano. His mother-in-law played the piano, and his sons and his nephews were the band.
Talented family.
Powerhouse of a performer. Powerhouse. Just, you come out of there. The lovely thing is when you go and see a performer like it, you come out of there exhilarated and go, you forget all your troubles.
Yeah, you do when you watch a variety or a good comedy show. It takes your mind away from...
And the world events, you must remember the wonderful Neville King.
Yes, yeah. I'm writing a book at the moment, Adrian, all about ventriloquists, and Neville features highly, but so many stories I've got from people about Neville. Very funny ones, as you can imagine.
Well, the names I remember who I worked with was John Boucher.
Yeah, I love John.
Tony Adams.
Yes, we just lost Tony earlier this year, didn't we? And Grandad.
Yeah. Did you remember one from Nottingham called Johnny Roberts?
Yes. Yeah, I spoke to his son last year, yeah.
Yeah, he had the most aggressive.
His dummy was quite aggressive, wasn't it?
Oh, very, very funny. And then there was a wonderful, he was born in England, but I think he was brought up in America, Jack O'Reilly, who changed his name to
Valentine Vox. Yes, I've got his book.
Yeah, I think he wrote about 3 books in total, didn't he? I can see your lips move.
Yes.
History and the Art of Ventriloquism.
I was taught by Jimmy Tamley, and Jimmy Tamley bought me that when I was a kid, a teenager, and I went away and learned a lot from that book.
Jimmy's a sweet man and a great actor.
Yes, he is. I love Jimmy.
And the other one I was lucky enough to work with on a ship was Jay Johnson.
Did you work with Jay? Well, he's incredible, isn't he?
Because he was massive. Do you remember what was it?
Soap with Billy Crystal. I actually interviewed Jay Johnson for my book as well. I interviewed quite a lot of vents like Ron Lucas, Jay Johnson, Willie Tyler. Some really good vents. So you worked with Jay on a ship, did you?
Yes, he was. The act was very vaudeville, but wonderful act.
Wow.
Really enjoyed him. And then Terry Rogers. You remember Terry Rogers?
I actually worked with Terry when I was 15 years old. I did a little... it was a student video that we made at Stratford East in London. And I spent 2 days with Terry. And we were like pen pals for a while as well. She was wonderful.
Oh, wonderful. And then going back before that, Fred Russell.
Well, I know you don't remember Fred.
No. But he was Val Parnell's father, wasn't he?
Yes, and he was the godfather of ventriloquists, Fred Russell. And early on in our water rats, obviously, because we're both water rats. So
that's right.
Yeah, and he features very highly in the early water rat days, doesn't he? When you think about the comedians that were in the Rats, Adrian, it's unbelievable, isn't it, to see how many acts were before us. I was proposed by Roy Hudd and Roger de Courcy, and my king rat was Rick Wakeman. Who was your proposer?
My proposer, it was Paul Daniels and Bryn Williams, a Toastmaster, because I'd worked with Bryn so many times at private functions and corporate events.
Yes.
Where I worked with 2 other great events and corporate events was Paul Sheridan and Nina Conte.
Yeah, they're great.
Do you know the story, the Ray Allen story? I was doing a summer season down in Babacoon. Ars Williams, Daly and Wayne, and Alan Randall and Bobby Bennett.
Blimey.
And Ray Allen was doing a Sunday concert down there, but he knew the boys. He knew the double act, or was Alan Ron. I think it was Alan Ron, he knew. But he told us a story. They'd be walking down the street and a woman stopped him one day. Are you the ventriloquist that was killed in the car crash? And he said yes. And she turned around to her friend and said, I told you it was him.
She's talking about Dennis Spicer, obviously, but
Yes, that's right. Then wonderful Dennis Spicer.
Isn't that crazy?
And one of the nicest stories I heard just a couple of years ago, a cruise director who shall remain nameless, a ventriloquist arrived from Las Vegas. The cruise director said to him, you're on Thursday night, 2:45 minutes, same show. And he said, then your second show is on Sunday night, different material, but the same for both shows. And he looked around and the ventriloquist was pale. And he said, what's wrong? He said, I've just done about 18 years in Vegas and I've never done more than 10 minutes.
Wow, that's incredible.
No, but the cruise director said to him, well, you're no good to me. He said, you might as well go home. So the vent goes out, and about 2 minutes later, there's a knock on the cruise director's door. And he said, come in. And the vent popped his head around the door and said to the cruise director, would you accept 2 5s?
That is genius. I love that. I've never heard that story. That's brilliant.
It's a wonderful. It just killed me when he told me about it.
Did he stay on board? I guess not.
He didn't, because bless him, he did. Because you take a lot of young performers that do comedy stores now. They used to do 20 minutes.
Yeah.
They go on a ship. They need to break them in gradually.
Yeah.
Because when I left Northern Ireland, for instance, I only ever did half an hour to 40 minutes in nightclubs. I think I was top in the building when I was 19 years old.
Really?
No, not because it was any good, because I was probably one of the only few comics around in those days.
Yeah.
I remember the guy who was instrumental getting me to England to work in England was a wonderful singer called Jackie Ray.
Okay.
He used to be the compere, the Talk in the North in Manchester.
Right.
And he'd come home because he was originally from Belfast. His father had been killed in a hit and run accident by a drunk driver or something, and he'd come home to put his business into probate and whatever all you have to do. And he started working again. And he seen me work, and he come round to me afterwards. He said, great show tonight. He said, but you can stay here doing that the rest of your life, and you can see if you can get any better. He never once said to me you were funny, but he did say, you've got a lot of bottle.
I guess that was his way of paying compliments, really. That's
Yeah.
wow.
I can watch a young comic that's only been out of 6 months and still learn from him. I always say to young performers, look, I do not know all the answers, but I'll tell you this much. I've made all the mistakes. If I can help you and develop you quicker and move you a step forward, like a lot of performers did with me, I would certainly do it.
I tell you, in this time, Adrian, where you can't actually go out and work, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to tuition people maybe over the internet or whatever, because you've got all the skills to do that, you know. And I know you'd want to do it for free, but people will kill to learn from you that's been there and done that. It's a wonderful, you know, to have lessons in writing or performing and to heckling and any subject in comedy. That is definitely something that, you know, I'd sign up to, because it's just a masterclass. Is that something that you've ever thought about doing?
Yeah, but there's a wonderful story that Burt Reynolds told. He was doing a movie with James Stewart, and they were running out of money, and things were bad with the director and the producer and everything. And they were doing a cowboy movie in Mexico. And the producer came in to Burt Reynolds. He said, listen, Burt, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to start shooting at 6 in the morning if we're going to finish this movie. He said, well, you have to be in at 4 for makeup. So he goes in at 4 o'clock, and sitting in the chair beside him is James Stewart, who's a massive world star.
Yeah.
And he said to James Stewart, what are you doing here, getting makeup and all put on? And he said, I know from experience that close-ups are easier done if the other person's there. And he said, it was my first movie, and it knocked me sideways. And he said to James Stewart, how can I ever help you? And James Stewart said, pass it on.
Oh,
Pass it on. And that's what you're supposed to do in show business.
that's nice.
If you've had... I have never felt I've worked a day in my life. Never felt I've worked a day in my life. I've had great nights, I've had horrible nights, but as a performer, what happens when you start off, you have more bad nights than you have good nights.
Yeah.
And then as you get into... The silly thing about being any sort of comedy performer, you actually work the worst venues when you're least experienced, and when you've got the total experience, that's when you're working the best venues. And you should be working when you're least experienced.
It's true, isn't it? But that you're kind of put into the deep end. When I was 24, I finished pantomime, and somebody said to me, "There's a guy called Wee Willie Harris who's supposed to fly out with me next week, and we've just finished in panto." He said, "It's a 2-week contract in Benidorm." And they said, "Do you want to come out with your dummies and do it?" And I said, "Yes." I had no work. So I went out to Benidorm, and I was on, after 2 blue comics, I went on. Then there was a stripper. Then there was another 2 comics. And I done that for 3 months. I stayed for 3 months instead of 2 weeks. Because I was learning every night, and it was literally, I was doing an hour. They moved my act actually from 11 p.m. to 12 midnight because I kept all the families in and the bars were full. So it was the first time they had a family act on the strip, you know. But it was definitely a lesson for me. I learned a lot watching the other comics, and I didn't do any blue material. I just kept to what I knew. But I learned from it.
Ice and Teeth.
I've been in the business over 50 years, but when somebody says that to you, have they been in the business 1 year 50 times? or have they learned each year and improved? You should always look back on your act and think, I'm better than I was last year.
Yeah.
Every comic, in many ways, should look back at the material and go, oof, I didn't do something like that, did I? You constantly move. Well, I was lucky enough to write for Monkhurst. And the one thing, when he was in his 70s, the thing that amazed me about him, he was talking about material of today.
Yes.
He was relevant of subjects of today.
Definitely. That's genius to do that, isn't it? I mean, Ted Rogers said of you when you were on 321, he said you were as modern as today. And he said that you were doing a lot of observational humour before many of today's comics come around. So have you always been topical, Adrian, with your style?
Well, I always liked Ted. I remember seeing Ted Rogers at the ABC in Blackpool with Sasha Distel, Olivia Newton-John, the Barnum Knights, and Stephen Capelli in a Sunday concert.
What a bill.
He ripped the place. Well, I know, and he ripped the place apart. He really did. And I was lucky enough, my dad's youngest brother lived in New York, in East Islip in Long Island.
Yeah.
And my Uncle Billy should have been a comedian.
Was he just natural at being funny?
Yeah, but how often have you had people, my mate's the funniest man in the world? Well, why isn't he doing it? It's like people complain about footballers. If it was that easy, we'd all be doing it.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's not easy to get out there and actually be there. And I know, I worked a lot with Dave Evans, and I know you knew Dave.
Oh, well, the trouble with Dave would come off after 2 hours, and he would look at you and say, "I nearly had them, Adrian." You tore them apart. What a performer!
I loved working with Dave, and he would tell me about his son Lee, but he would also tell me about his son Wayne. Wayne was just naturally funny, but he would never take it to stage. So it's kind of interesting how you would get these natural. I mean, Dave said sometimes Wayne was funnier than Lee, but they are just a naturally funny family, aren't they?
Yeah, but my brother was always very funny, and it's my son who works in football, but Callum's one of these lads that he can sit down, and he's a very good writer of comedy, and he loves. I remember when he was young, we were watching Seinfeld one night on the TV, and he turned around to me and he said, "Dad," he said, "when he talks about a subject, there's nothing left. You can't write another joke about it because he's covered everything." Dottie was like that.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I saw Jerry Seinfeld last year in London. I had to go and get a ticket to see Seinfeld, so I actually flew back from a cruise ship, and I went from the airport direct into the Hammersmith, and I sat and watched Seinfeld do an hour, and he done this mobile phone routine for about 15 minutes, and there was nothing else you could say about the routine, but the audience that Seinfeld has got was just such a mix, from people watching Seinfeld in the 80s to people watching comedians in cars doing coffee and things. So he had like teenagers up to like 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, and he ripped them apart with this one mobile phone routine. It is fantastic.
And then the other thing about Seinfeld, they always say once a comic gets over 65, they lose the energy. But on his last special, I watched on Netflix, I think he's got more energy now, because he opened up with a pace which he never used to.
Yeah.
He opened up with a killer routine. He's just but there's so many great comics. The one comic I was just about to talk to from New York, who I always loved, was Alan King.
Yeah. I read his book.
And if there's anybody out there who loves comedy, you should go to YouTube and put in Survive By, and that routine is as good as Who's on First, the Abbott Costello routine.
Yes.
Which is a classic routine. Just Alan King, I was always he had great command of an audience.
Yeah, he was brilliant, wasn't he? A lot of people look up to Alan King as well. Now, I always thought if you was a sitcom yourself, you would be Curb Your Enthusiasm. Have you seen that with Larry David?
Oh, yeah. But, when he was a stand-up, he used to get up on stage and he'd go, I don't fancy it tonight, and he'd walk off.
Larry David would?
Yeah.
I didn't know he was a comic. I've not researched that too well.
He was a stand-up. He used to do all the comedy stores and all the ones, Catch a Rising Star, all the clubs in the States.
Yeah, well, he's got such a comedy mind on him. It's genius. My wife and I just finished watching Curb, the 10th season just last week, But I mean, the style of your comedy reminds me of Curb. It's just someone coming out complaining about this and that and that, and the subjects you choose, it's everyday life. It's everything we know, and that's what drags people in. We live through your routines.
But you got to. It's like I always said. Young comics said, "How do I write material?" I always say, get a little dictaphone, a little recorder. Be mad. What makes you mad? What makes you happy? What makes you sad? Talk about it all, and you'll find something in there.
Oh, conversational.
5 years ago, I suffered a major stroke on stage.
Yes.
And I remember thinking to myself at the time, this is 20 minutes of material I never thought it was going to have.
Wow. You was on the Oceana when that happened, weren't you?
Yeah, I did 2 shows while I was having a stroke.
Wow. Jimmy Osmond done the same thing. He was doing panto in Birmingham, and he was actually having a stroke halfway through the second show. But did you carry on not knowing what was happening to you?
Yes, it was only the next day, and my legs were heavy, because I do this called Irish dance thing. It's just a silly thing.
Yeah.
And I went to do it, my legs wouldn't lift. And I remember looking at the audience, and there's a look on their face going, what's she doing?
Really?
What's happening? So I didn't have the normal symptoms, a lot of people. Then they took me up to the hospital, had a CAT scan, a mid-cranium stroke, which 80% of people die from, or left locked-in syndrome. And then the doctor said to me, the next 24 hours, and it was crucial, because you could have another major stroke and die. He said, but whatever you do, get some rest and relax.
So you flew home, and that was that?
No, I stayed in the hospital in Madeira for 3 weeks.
Okay, because the rehabilitation has to be a quite crucial thing, doesn't it, to get you back on your feet? But it took you 14 months, didn't it?
It took me 14 months to do a little 20-minute spot in the theatre, and then it took me another 6 months to get back to doing cruises. So it was 20 months in total.
Blimey. Adrian, I remember being devastated along with everyone in the business to hear that this had happened to you. But we were behind you and delighted to hear that you were building your strength physically and undoubtedly mentally to get yourself back on the stage. But you had to have a strong mindset for returning to normal life and to actually...
Do you want to know the truth about it all, Steve?
Sure.
2 weeks before I had a stroke, I went into a wonderful Russell and Bromley's in Bond Street, and I found the dress shoes I've been after most of my life, because I always liked dress shoes. And I bought these wonderful dress shoes, and I moaned and complained in the hospital, I'm never going to get to wear my dress shoes. And the most important, because most important thing was I got to wear those dress shoes on me.
Oh, that's good. After all that years of service you did for them, and it's so nice that they had you back. And how did you feel that first night that you stood back on stage and in your new shoes?
Well, probably worse than when I first went on stage when I was 16, because I knew more about it.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was 16, I was a little bit naive and didn't really know what was coming up.
I see, yeah.
And what happened was, truthfully about it, there was only a small ship, the Adonia.
Okay.
Remember the Adonia?
Yeah.
And a wonderful little room it is, gorgeous. And I'd rehearsed for 3 weeks. But the mistake I'd made, I'd over-rehearsed. So when I went out to do my first show, I could have done the show to a wall. And I came off stage and I was soaking in perspiration, which even when I die doesn't happen to me. I can really die well and great.
And dry.
Graceful.
Yes.
And was soaking wet. And I turned to Vivian and said, well, I'd give it a go, but I don't think it's going to work. And Vivian turned around to me, and we've been together since we were 16. And she said, all you've got to do is relax and enjoy it. You forgot to enjoy it. You were so intense in doing it, you forgot to. You know, there's a thing in sport, it's called paralyzation by analyzation.
Okay.
And sometimes performers overanalyze something.
Yes.
Instead of you doing it as you would normally do it, don't think about it, you just go out and do it. There was a wonderful experiment done with young professional cricketers where they put a little mat in front of the bails, and they said that they got 20 young professional cricketers. If you hit the mat, you get 3 points, and 18 out of 20 hit the mat and got 3 points. And then 2 hours later, they brought them back and said, right, if you miss the mat, you're out. There's no difference.
No, that's true.
But
wow.
There's only about 4 or 5 of them hit the mat.
Yeah.
There's no difference in that. It's just the setup is different.
Yeah, that's true. Well, do you feel it was something, coming back, you think it was something you couldn't ignore about writing about the stroke and what you've been through? Because you always used everyday life in your act, and so this is no different, really. So, but you were confident talking about it.
You know, if life, it's an old saying, if life gives you 100 reasons to cry, you got 1,000 reasons to laugh. And if you can laugh at it, it'll not defeat you.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
And the other things, but the plus side of it is the amount of people on the ships that come up to me. I had a lady, the last cruise I did in January there, a lady come up to me, and her husband had a stroke about 8 months, and she said he was very depressed, and she brought him out, and he was feeling very down. He had retired, he'd been a policeman. And I sat down with him for about an hour and so on and talked to him. And that's what you need to do in life.
Yeah.
And she came to me the next day, she said, he's got a whole new outlook on it. Because the awful thing about, and I'm not complaining here, but you're trying to be told by a lot of people, once you've had a stroke, if you don't improve after 6 months, it's not going to come back. I had nothing in my arm for nearly 8 months, and my leg. It's 5 years later, and I can write now. In my right hand, I go to the gym 3 days a week. I'm back in the gym again. I'm walking better. I still need some stability in my right leg.
Okay.
But the improvement I've made is constantly improving. Like, for instance, the strange thing is, I didn't have wonderful handwriting, but it's quite neat and precise now, because I've had to relearn the handwrite.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? But do you think it's your dedication for getting back on stage? You had a reason to do it, and nothing was going to stop you, and that's why we were all so proud of you. So, I mean, you never gave up, did you? They do say that the business, you don't leave the business, but the business leaves you. But Adrian Walsh wasn't ready to leave.
No, but it's a strange thing, It's the only time you fail is when you give up. I always used to tell my son, and I can't remember who said it. It was a great basketball player. He said, "A setback is only a setup for a comeback."
I like that. That's nice.
And that's what it's about. and you're only defeated when you totally give up. Why wouldn't I get back to do what I always wanted to do all my life?
Yeah, well, we're so happy that you have. It's so nice to hear that you're back on
But
stage.
you mustn't lose your sense of humour about anything. It's like when I first had my stroke, you get a thing called spasticity, where it's involuntary jumping,
Okay.
and the muscles twitching. And I had a Fitbit on, I forgot to take it off when I got into bed at night. And when I woke up in the morning, I'd done 193 steps, and I hadn't left the bed.
Wow, sleepwalking maybe.
But it's just all these things, you think, I'll put that in the act.
Yeah, so that's one of your lines. Yeah.
It's like getting older. I always try to say to people, I had a big birthday in August.
You're 70 when you...
Yeah, you're right. I'm now 50 and 252 months.
That's brilliant. Your ad libs are priceless as well. And I saw you on a clip yesterday. There's a moment when you ask the audience if anyone has teenagers, and someone shouts yes.
Oh yeah, that's on American Ship. Yeah, that's more. Yeah.
Firstly, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful quality, really nice quality. And I'm crying by the end of this because you say how old, they reply 30, and then you explain the question again and ask them, anyone got teenagers? Another one says yes, and you say how old, and they say 20. Do you still ask the audience questions, or have you give up?
I like going off in the tangent. I have been known to go on stage and not do one thing out of my act. But
really, there's a danger in that, isn't there? There's a danger involving audiences. But if you're great at improvising, then comedy gold can grace the stage, which is can bring a nice moment that even you've not heard before.
Yeah, but audiences are funny.
Yeah.
And I always said, people are funny. I've had people say things to me. I remember being at a function one night, and I said to the fellow beside me, "What do you do for a living?" And he told me, and I said, "Where do you live?" He said, "It's a very small village." He said, "It's a sort of village, if you've got a milk float, you're a salesman instead of a rep."
Yeah.
But I've always had people say things to me, and I always take note of them and give credit to where it's due.
Yeah, definitely. I always have. I've done that. I do that in my book quite a lot, actually. I thank people like Keith Harris, Jimmy Townley, Ron Lucas, and the comedians that have helped me in the past. Because people do give you their time, and it's so nice. I mean, you're doing that for me today. I really appreciate your time today.
It's called passing it on.
Yes.
Everybody did it with me. And I said there wasn't one person who turned me down for advice. I remember going up the northeast in the working men's clubs, and you get paid off a lot. Everybody did. But then there were comics. I remember being on a tram in Blackpool and a wonderful comic called Mike Burton. Do you remember Mike Burton?
I've heard of him. Yeah.
From the comedians.
Okay.
And
He was quite tall, wasn't he, Mike? Was he quite tall?
Yeah, that's right. That's the man with the glasses and the crew cut.
Yeah, very funny looking.
And I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh," and then when Jackie Ray was come for the talk in North Manchester, Dave Allen was there.
Right.
And he invited me over to meet Dave. And Dave, for about 3 nights, because I was working in the nightclubs in Manchester, invited me back to the dressing room, and it was 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was only a young comic, about 25, 26 at the time. And I said to him about getting paid off in nightclubs. And he said to me, "Never ever worry about that." He said, a lot of comics, the audiences walk out when you're not doing well. He said, "When I used to die," he said, "they used to walk towards me. They hated me that much." So if one of your idols can stand in front of you and say that,
yeah,
it's a tremendous thing. And it's a tremendous honesty on their part as well.
It is, and you never forget that, do you? You never forget the moments. I mean, you're reminiscing about 30 years ago, and it stays with you, those moments as well.
Oh, it's more, hey, Steve, it's more than 30 years ago.
I was taking a modest guess.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know the show Come Dine With Me?
Yes.
I'm just going to have a bit of fun here, but I imagine you and more funny people getting together, and like four great comics just sitting there writing fresh material. If this is just for fun, but imagine you and 3 other comedians, maybe no longer with us or alive of your choice. Who would those other 3 comedians be sat at your table?
Oh, dear. dear. Now, well, my first idol really was Alan King.
Oh yes, brilliant.
And I would have thought the next one would have been, he was so helpful to me, and just a wonderful, wonderful comic. And you're talking about laugh ratio, Frank Carson.
Oh yeah, I loved Frank. Yeah.
Just to see him again and to hear that laughter.
Yeah, we missed that, didn't we? He was on TV so much, and everyone just stopped at home to watch Frank Carson, didn't they? He was just that lovable uncle that we wanted.
And probably the other one would either be Bob Monkhouse or Ken Dodd.
Love to see Doddy
back. The older generation, the four new ones, I would pick three new ones. I'd pick three different ones. You know, so I don't really. To me, you get up there and you have a go, man. I admire all of them. Comedians should have the same kinship as women have in childbirth. I know the ladies are not like me saying that, but we all know what it's like to suffer. As a comic, we've all had those bad nights, Steve. We really have, and we've all had great nights.
Yeah, but we remember the bad ones, though, don't we?
yeah, but it's those ones that keep you humble, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it keeps your feet on the ground. I mean, we're talking about different ages of comics and things, but you've done a TV show called Act Your Age. It was a radio panel show starring John Richardson and Lucy Porter and you and Roy Walker. I imagine you could have gave them a run for their money.
No, they were a joy to work with.
They're great. They're great comics. But was that a show you enjoyed?
Yes, because I had a wonderful Scottish comedian, Kevin
Bridges. Oh, brilliant! Yeah, Kevin's a great comic.
And I had to do the 1 minute thing with him.
Really?
And then we had Jack Whitehall.
Oh wow! Yeah, they're big names.
And we had John Richardson and Sarah Mulligan.
Yes, brilliant.
I'm glad they all learned something from me, because they've done all right having to bless them. They're all great comedians.
Yeah.
I should ask them for their advice.
I don't think so. I think you've been there. A lot of people have learned from you. After cancelling 14 months of work, now you've had to cancel another year's work. It's not your fault.
This is my second gap year.
So that's what I like. You're looking at the positives, which is a lovely way to end it.
The way I look at it, it's been horrible for some people. It really has.
Yeah.
But I spent lying out in the back garden in the sun, eating too much, watching some wonderful comedians on Netflix. Both my grandfathers fought in the First World War. They would have swapped anything what I've gone through in the last life. Some people have had some terrible times, but good times never last and bad times never last. And we'll get through this some way or another. And I didn't know when I was going to get back to work full time. And it took me 20 months. And for all those young performers out there, enjoy the moment with your family. Enjoy your moment preparing the act, getting ready for. Because when it does come back, people will want entertainment more than ever.
And you have to be ready, don't you?
Yeah, it's escapism. I worked last Friday night down at Warner's at Cricket St Thomas for the first time in 6 months.
Oh, lovely.
And they've done Warner's have done a magnificent job getting people back to work again. In a room that normally holds 400 to 500, the first show was 110 and second show was about 70. But there was only about 276 people there. But I take my hat off to the staff there and to the management and to the hierarchy, the way they've been able to bring it back again. To give people an opportunity to work in our business.
Yeah, I think Born Leisure and Warners have done incredible, and Butlins. They just. Yeah. I've been very lucky to be one of those acts as well that are back. But it is incredible to be part of that, and to see, and the people, they're laughing again, aren't they, Adrian? You must have enjoyed that gig.
And the lovely thing is, show business perpetrates itself. There's always wonderful new acts coming through. You must know Max Fulham, another wonderful young vent coming through.
I know Max. I met Max when he was 14, and I put him in a talent competition. And I knew that I'd see him again because he's got that passion about the art of what we do, you know, and variety. So yeah, he's great.
You passed it on. Jimmy Tamlin did it for you, and now you passed it on. I just think he's a wonderful young performer. He really is.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's nice you brought his name up because everyone's talking about Max right now. And Hilary O'Neill's been amazing for Max, so she's been perfect.
She's been there, done that. There used to be a wonderful act called Stutzburg Cats.
Yes.
One of great nightclub acts, great theatre acts, super performer, good singer, good impressionist. She, a little bit like a female Dave Evans, because Dave to me was a great musician. Dave was a great singer and a wonderful comedian and a wonderful impressionist. He had it all.
Yeah, I loved watching him.
Now, I worked at Wimbledon Country Club with him one night, and the audience were a bit rowdy, and I felt I got very abusive with him. And Dave just went over and socked him one, put him on his back, and went back up on stage and finished the act. Like nothing had happened.
Wow. Did you remember, do you know the story of Dave Evans when he lost his luggage in South America?
No, I don't know that.
And he's standing there with Shirley and the port agent, and so he's saying, well, where's the luggage then? And the port agent says, I'm sorry, it's gone to San Jose. And they're somewhere else in South America. And Dave says, well, that's it then, innit? And the port agent says, what would you mean? He said, we're never going to get it back again. He says, no, we're tracing it now. And Dave says, well, no one knows the way to San Jose. And it's just Dave all round, isn't it? He just had humour in those horrible situations that turned it all round. And there's so many stories about him.
But it's not, see, people used to say about Frank Carson, oh, he's always funny all the time. But that was him. He was naturally like that.
Yes.
It wasn't. He didn't. Frank wasn't getting paid for it. I've been with Frank where he would stop people and say, "Don't you recognise me?" My life's ambition really was to get Frank Carson and Norman Collier and do a stage show of the Flintstones. Frank Carson and Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble would have been Norman Collier. There was another. Norman was the same. And Norman was a great audience. I met Norman the first time in the dressing room in South Pier, and I just cracked a little joke or something. And the next thing he's on the floor. It wasn't that, but Frank said, no, Norman just laughs at everything. He's got a great sense of humour.
It was brilliant. You know about him and Neville King? They would be in restaurants and pretend they've got dogs fighting under the table. They'd both be going... So you got Neville King on one side and Norman on the other, and just like creating havoc in a restaurant with these pretend dogs on leads.
I was doing a summer season in Clacton, and Norman was there. And do you remember Grot Bags?
Yes, Carol Lee Scott, yeah.
We were in a Chinese restaurant about 2 o'clock in the morning. They're opening up just for a show was due.
Nice.
The family that run this wonderful restaurant had no idea who Norman was. And I swear to you, I thought I was going to have to call for an ambulance. They were laughing that much, this family. And they went and got people out of bed upstairs to come down. And naturally, funny man.
Oh, kind of always on kind of comics, you know. And back to Dave again, Dave Evans. I'd sit on cruise ships with Dave, and I'm sure you have. I worked on the QE2 with Dave, and that's why I love that ship, because the memories I've got on that ship was incredible. But we would sit for about 6 hours in the afternoon drinking tea, just talking and writing gags. It was just constant, you know, and reminiscing about these days like we are. It's so nice.
The thing I feel sorry for young performers today, and this is a strange thing to say, there's no word to be bad, because when Dave started and I started, there's hundreds and thousands of clubs everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a bad night, you can move on and try and get that right. No, nobody starts good at anything.
No.
I don't care whether you're a scientist or you're a baseball player or a footballer or a cricketer. Nobody starts good. You've got to learn that craft.
You've got to earn it and learn it, haven't you?
Totally, Steve. Totally agree with that comment.
Yeah.
I really do. And this, you're only as good as your last show. I always think you're only as good as your next one, because the last one doesn't count.
No.
That next audience, they don't care how good you were the night before.
No, that's true. Adrian, it's been a pleasure talking to you, mate, and it's so nice to hear your voice. And thank you so much for your time and being part of Eyes and Teeth. It's been
been
fun.
Pleasure, Steve, and I don't want to keep you out of bed because I know you're a lot younger than me. Remember those signs that you know you're getting old. When you get in the shower and you've still got your socks on. And you've got to watch out for putting a pair of glasses on top of a pair of glasses you've always got on.
I've got all that to look forward to.
Yeah, and taking a pair of glasses off that you haven't got on. That's another one.
I'm only 45, but I do this quite a lot, where I'm talking to someone on the phone, like I am now, and I'm looking for my phone. So, oh, hang on, I need to send you a picture from my phone. And you're looking for your phone, but it's on your ear. So.
Well, I do a routine about glasses, and it's funny. And this is a true thing that happened to me, where I said, I lost my glasses. I spent 45 minutes looking for them. Guess where they were? And everybody in the audience said, on top of your head. And I said, no, my wife had them on looking for her glasses.
That's brilliant. That's so nice, because people can picture that straight away, can't they? It's visual.
It's like my dad, when my father got into his 90s, he got a hearing aid. And he would never put it in because it used the batteries. I said, but Dad, you get them free. He said, son, you don't abuse the privilege. Right? And then he would phone me and I said, you haven't phoned me all week. I said, Dad, I've been phoning you all week and you haven't answered the phone. And he said the immortal words, if I knew you were going to phone and I put my hearing aid in.
That's funny.
I mean, you can't write material like that, Steve. You can't.
No, you can't. I mean, you could have text back then, but there was no text messages or emails, was there?
No, not at all. Tell me about it. Steve, it's been a pleasure and a joy, my friend.
Thank you so much for your time. I know it's precious.
Keep well and healthy. Bye-bye.
To find out more or connect with Adrian Walsh, check out adrianwalsh.net. This week's comedy quote from another water rat is from Stan Laurel of Laurel and Hardy. Humour is the truth. Wit is an exaggeration of the truth. Thank you, Stan. Eyes and Teeth is written, produced and hosted by Steve Hewlett. Vocals provided by Lola, Larissa and Nina Hewlett. Special guest vocals by Rich T. Eyes and Teeth music and jingles produced and performed by the one and only Mr. Kevin Dean, one of my great mates and brother water rats. Listen in next time to Eyes and Teeth on edition 3, when I'll be talking to the brilliant stand-up alternative, or not alternative. Alternatively, he can be mainstream as well, but he does lots of different styles of comedy, whether it's television, stand-up, comedy clubs, or talking heads. Well, we're all talking heads, aren't we? We're heads, we're talking... Anyway, it's Andre Vincent. See you next time.